For over 100,000 years, caves were the safest place on Earth. They protected our ancestors from lions, from storms, from freezing nights that could kill a person in hours. A cave was a fortress carved by nature itself, free, ready-made, and nearly indestructible. So here's the question that doesn't get asked enough. If caves were so safe, why did humans ever leave them? Why would a species that survived ice ages, predators, and near extinction inside these stone shelters suddenly walk out and never really go back? The answer isn't just they found houses. The real story involves a changing planet, a food revolution, diseases hiding in the dark, and a psychological shift that changed what it meant to be human. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the cave humanity's oldest home became something we almost never live in again. Let's go back to the beginning. Here's the first myth we need to break. Ancient humans were not cave people in the way movies show us. Most of our ancestors didn't live deep inside caves permanently. They used caves the way we might use an emergency shelter when it mattered most. Caves were used seasonally. During brutal winters or during the hottest, most dangerous parts of the year, a cave mouthed the entrance area. Not the deep, dark tunnels offered something priceless: consistent temperature, protection from wind and rain, and a defensible position with only one entrance to guard. Think about it from a survival standpoint. If you're sleeping in the open, a predator can approach you from any direction. In a cave, there's only one way in. Our ancestors weren't choosing caves because they were cozy. They were choosing caves because caves were mathematically the safest available option. But here's the catch: caves are not evenly distributed across the Earth. You can't just decide to live near one. They exist in specific geological regions: limestone hills, mountain ranges, certain river valleys. Most of the planet has no caves at all. Which means that from the very start, humanity's relationship with caves was temporary and geographically limited. As soon as humans developed something that could replace a cave's protection, something portable, something they could build anywhere, the cave's biggest advantage disappeared. And that's exactly what happened. To understand why humans left caves, we have to talk about something bigger than human choice. The Earth itself was transforming. Around 11,700 years ago, something enormous happened. The last ice age ended. This period, known as the Pleistocene, gave way to the Holocene, the warmer, more stable climate era we still live in today. For hundreds of thousands of years before this, the planet had been locked in brutal, unpredictable cold cycles. Massive ice sheets, freezing winds, unstable weather that could wipe out entire groups of people overnight. In that kind of world, a cave wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was often the only thing standing between a human family and death by exposure. But when the Ice Age ended, everything changed. Temperatures stabilized. Forests spread. Grasslands expanded across regions that used to be frozen wasteland. Rivers that had been locked in ice began flowing freely, carving fertile valleys. Suddenly, the environment itself was less hostile. You didn't need a fortress of stone to survive a Tuesday night anymore. The pressure that had forced humans into caves for shelter began to lift. And when survival pressure drops, something remarkable happens to any species, including us. Behavior starts to diversify. Humans began experimenting. They started testing whether they could build their own shelter, in their own chosen location, instead of being tied to wherever the nearest cave happened to be. This is one of the most underrated turning points in human history. The Earth warmed up, and that warmth quietly gave humanity permission to leave the cave behind. But climate alone doesn't explain everything. Something else was happening at the exact same time. Something that would change human life more than fire, more than tools, more than almost anything before it. Around 10 to 12,000 years ago, a quiet revolution began in places like the Fertile Crescent, modern-day Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. Humans started doing something no cave could ever accommodate. They started farming. For nearly all of human history before this point, People were hunter-gatherers. They followed animal herds, they moved with the seasons, chasing food wherever it appeared. In that lifestyle, a cave made perfect sense. You needed a temporary base, not a permanent one, because you were constantly on the move anyway. But farming demanded the exact opposite. If you plant wheat or barley, you can't just walk away for 6 months and come back. You have to stay. You have to protect that field from animals, from weather, from other tribes. You have to be there for planting, for weeding, for harvest. Farming chained humans to the land in a way nothing had before. And no cave happens to sit next to fertile farmland exactly when and where you need it. The rocky hillsides that contain caves are usually terrible for growing crops. Good soil is in river valleys, floodplains, and open plains, places with no caves at all. So humans faced a choice. Keep living in the cave and abandon the crops, or build a new kind of shelter right next to the fields that were now feeding them. They chose the fields. This is where we start seeing humanity's first constructed homes, simple huts made of mud brick, wood, and thatch, built in places like Adelhike in modern Turkey, one of the earliest known towns in human history, dated to around 9,000 years ago. Thousands of people lived there, in homes they built with their own hands, surrounded by wheat fields and domesticated animals. For the first time, humans weren't searching for shelter. They were manufacturing it exactly where they needed it, in whatever size they wanted. And once you can build your own shelter, the cave stops being special. It becomes just one option among many. And it's about to become the worst option of all. Here's something most people never think about. Caves were quietly making people sick. Imagine a fire burning inside a cave with no proper ventilation. The smoke has nowhere to go. It fills the chamber, coats the walls, and sits in the lungs of every person and child inside. Researchers studying ancient cave-dwelling populations have found strong evidence linking prolonged cave habitation to serious respiratory damage. Constant smoke exposure, combined with cold, damp stone that never fully dries, created conditions perfect for lung infections, arthritis, and chronic illness. Caves are also naturally damp. Water seeps through limestone. Humidity stays trapped with poor airflow. That combination is a breeding ground for mold, bacteria, and parasites. Skeletal remains from cave-dwelling populations frequently show signs of joint disease and bone deformities consistent with cold, wet, low sunlight environments. And that brings up another massive problem: sunlight. Or the lack of it. Human bodies need sunlight to produce vitamin D, which is essential for strong bones and a functioning immune system. People spending large portions of their lives in dim cave interiors were at serious risk of vitamin D deficiency, leading to bone-softening conditions like rickets, especially in children. Then there's the waste problem. In open camps, waste could be left behind as a group moved on. But caves, especially ones used repeatedly across generations, accumulated filth. Animal remains, human waste, and rotting food scraps built up in confined spaces with poor airflow and ideal environment for disease to spread rapidly through a small, enclosed population. So the very thing that made caves feel safe, their enclosed, sealed-off nature, was also slowly poisoning the people living inside them. Once humans started building their own homes above ground, they unknowingly solved all of these problems at once. Open-air huts allowed smoke to escape through gaps and smoke holes. Structures could be positioned to catch sunlight, waste could be managed and moved away from sleeping areas. Ventilation could be designed rather than left to the random shape of a rock formation. In other words, humans didn't just build houses because they were convenient. They built houses because caves were quietly killing them, generation after generation, in ways they were only beginning to understand. There's a simple mathematical problem with cave living that people rarely consider. Caves don't grow. A cave has a fixed size. It has a fixed number of chambers, a fixed floor area, a fixed capacity. A hut, on the other hand, can be built, and rebuilt, and expanded, and multiplied as many as you need, wherever you need them. As farming produced surplus food, more grain than a family could eat in a season, something happened that had never really happened before in human history at scale. Population growth accelerated. Stable food supply meant fewer deaths from starvation, more surviving children, and longer lifespans. But a single cave can only hold so many people before it becomes unlivable, overcrowded, filthy, and impossible to manage. Early farming communities needed a housing solution that could scale with a growing population. You can't split a cave into more caves, but you absolutely can build 10 huts where there used to be one. This is one of the most practical reasons caves fell out of use. It wasn't philosophical. It wasn't about comfort. It was pure logistics. As villages grew from a handful of families into settlements of hundreds of people, structured housing became the only realistic option. Archaeological sites like Adelhike eventually housed an estimated 5,000 to 8,000 people, numbers that would be physically impossible to fit into any natural cave system. Population growth didn't just allow humans to leave caves. In many places, it forced them to. Somewhere in this transition, humans crossed an invisible but massive threshold. They stopped merely finding shelter and started engineering it. Early structures were simple packed mud, woven reeds, animal hides stretched over wooden frames. But even these primitive homes offered something no cave ever could: customization. You could build a home near water, near farmland, near other families, forming the first real communities. You could build a door where you wanted one, a hearth positioned for proper airflow, walls thick enough for winter and thin enough for cooling in summer. Over the following centuries, this technology only improved. Mud brick gave way to fired brick. Simple huts evolved into multi-room structures. Settlements developed streets, shared walls, and eventually the first cities. Homes could now be inherited, expanded, repaired, or rebuilt entirely, none of which is possible with a cave. If a cave collapses or floods, it's gone forever. If a mud brick hut collapses, you rebuild it in days using materials from the ground beneath your feet. This was more than an upgrade in shelter. It was one of the earliest examples of humans bending the environment to fit their needs, instead of the other way around. And once that door opened, there was no reason to go back to depending on the random luck of finding a suitable rock formation nearby. Interestingly, caves didn't disappear from human life entirely, they just changed roles. As villages and towns developed, many caves shifted from being homes to being something else entirely: sacred spaces. Archaeological evidence from sites across Europe and Asia shows caves being used for burial rituals, religious ceremonies, and artistic expression, like the extraordinary painted caves of Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain, where humans created stunning artwork deep in chambers they likely never lived in. This shift is fascinating. Once humans no longer needed caves for daily survival, the psychological weight of these ancient shelters transformed. The place that once meant safety from death became a place associated with mystery, spirituality, and connection to ancestors. Caves became symbolic instead of practical, a pattern we still see today in cultures around the world that treat caves as spiritually significant sites, even though almost nobody actually lives in one anymore. In a strange way, humans didn't abandon caves out of disrespect. They outgrew the need for them and elevated them into something greater instead. So let's put it all together. Ancient humans didn't leave caves because caves were bad. They left because everything around them changed. The climate warmed, farming demanded permanent settlements near fertile land, health problems from smoke and damp accumulated over generations, and growing populations needed more space than any cave could offer. But underneath all of that is something deeper about what makes humans different from almost every other species on Earth. Most animals adapt to their environment through evolution slowly. Over thousands of generations, their bodies change to survive where they live. Humans did something different. Instead of waiting for our bodies to adapt to the cave, we adapted the world around us to fit what we needed. We built our own caves, better ones, safer ones we could place anywhere we wanted. That shift from finding shelter to creating it, might be one of the most important moments in our entire story as a species. It's the same instinct that later built cities, hospitals, and space stations. It all started with a simple decision, made by people we'll never know the names of, that they didn't have to accept what nature gave them. They could build something better. And the next time you walk into your own house, remember it's the direct descendant of a decision made 10,000 years ago by ancient humans who looked at the safety of a cave and decided to build something even safer, entirely on their own terms. If you found this as fascinating as I did, hit subscribe because next time we're exploring. You're not going to want to miss it. Let me know in the comments, if you had to survive using only what ancient humans had, would you have chosen the cave or would you have taken your chances outside?